So what I want to do for you now is just give you a little bit of an overview of what we mean by the concept of strategic entrepreneurship. So you'll notice that the title of this unit is actually strategic entrepreneurship, and what we're concerned with is going beyond simply entrepreneurial behaviours, but how we can adopt a strategic focus within an existing organisation or within a startup business that enables us to be more successful in our entrepreneurial behaviours, but to also marry those entrepreneurial behaviours up with the normal operational activities of our organisation. Now, in understanding strategic entrepreneurship, what I've done is to provide for you a couple of key articles. These are sort of foundational articles that outline for us what strategic entrepreneurship is. And in fact, if you want to really know a bit about strategic entrepreneurship, there is actually a whole journal, the Journal of Strategic Entrepreneurship, which is dedicated to this study. But I thought what I'd do here is just give you a couple of slides to introduce the concept of strategic entrepreneurship. I'll then get you to read those articles that I've put for you onto Milo, and I'll get you to think through what the main points are outlined in those articles. And then when we meet in week 2, we'll go through and discuss what strategic entrepreneurship actually looks like. So when we talk about strategic entrepreneurship, really what we're talking about is the intersection between entrepreneurship and strategic management. So both entrepreneurship and strategic management are dynamic processes. Okay, so they're both really concerned with ensuring that we maximise the performance of our organisation. And when we talk about maximising our performance, we're talking really about getting the greatest return on investment. We're talking about achieving or exceeding our objectives. And we're talking about maximising the benefit of our activities for the shareholders and stakeholders of our organisation. And we'll come back to the concept of stakeholders at various points throughout this semester. But really what we're talking about when we talk about a stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the ongoing success of the organisation. So entrepreneurial behaviours tend to be very much focused around new areas of activity, tend to be designed to open up new markets, new opportunities that we as an organisation might pursue. While strategic activities tend to be focused on our future actions within a defined or existing product market. And so really bringing together these two aspects enables us to apply a strategic lens to entrepreneurial behaviour. So strategic entrepreneurship really involves simultaneous opportunity seeking and advantage seeking behaviours that are designed to result in superior firm performance. So what does that mean? When an entrepreneurship engages in entrepreneurial activity, what they're doing is trying to maximise their success from taking advantage of opportunities. Now, their success may not actually always be about making more money or being more profitable. It's simply about taking advantage of an opportunity. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about opportunity seeking. We talk about maximising the benefit of leveraging new opportunities for the organisation. Strategic management, on the other hand, is really about achieving advantage relative to other firms or other businesses. So really when we engage in strategic entrepreneurship, what we're trying to do is use entrepreneurial processes and entrepreneurial activities to identify new opportunities for the organisation that enable us to gain significant market advantage over our competitors. So it's really done with that focus in mind, that we're trying to open up a new market, a new opportunity, a new customer base for the express purpose of achieving greater advantage for the organisation relative to other firms. And again, the reason we want to do that is if we can successfully identify new opportunities, we can do better jobs at actually deploying the resources we have available to the organisation. Now, there are some differences and tensions between strategic management and entrepreneurial behaviour. Strategic management really calls for a firm to establish and exploit competitive advantage within existing markets, okay, so within the markets that we're already operating in. While entrepreneurship really promotes the search for new competitive advantage through innovation, so through opening up new markets, new customer bases, and trying to service those more effectively and establish those markets before other firms are able to gain market position. So really, again, what we're trying to do with strategic entrepreneurship is use market development and opportunity seeking as a way of creating new ways for the organisation to achieve advantage over its competitive firms. And it really does involve taking entrepreneurial actions with a strategic perspective. Now, strategic entrepreneurship doesn't just happen instantaneously, and really it's something that organisations have to work very carefully and very deliberately to actually produce and develop within their organisations. And for strategic entrepreneurship to succeed and to occur, there are sort of three key things that need to be present within the organisation. And I just want to touch on these because I think, again, some of these concepts are very important to the general study of entrepreneurship, and there's certainly ideas or concepts that we will come back to at different points during the semester. So the first thing we need to be successful at strategic entrepreneurship is an entrepreneurial mindset. So an entrepreneurial mindset is really a way of thinking about a business that focuses on capturing the benefits of uncertainty. People who have an entrepreneurial mindset tend to be good at recognising opportunities, at being alert to what's happening in the world around them, and identifying opportunities quicker than anyone else can. So identifying a market opportunity before any of their competitors, any of the other firms in their industry are able to seek an outcome linked to that opportunity. We also need to think about an entrepreneurial culture within our organisation. Again, for an organisation to behave in an entrepreneurial way, it needs to have a culture present that tells people working in that organisation that entrepreneurship is a good thing. Remember that a culture is really a set of shared values, and if we have a set of shared values that are linked to entrepreneurial activity, then it's greater or easier for the organisation to be success in those entrepreneurial activities. And it also requires entrepreneurial leadership. Entrepreneurship really doesn't happen by chance. And if you look at great entrepreneurial organisations, whether it's Tesla and SpaceX with Elon Musk, or whether it's Apple, throughout their history with Steve Jobs and other leaders they've had at different point in times, whether it's Microsoft with Bill Gates, there needs to be someone there to lead entrepreneurship. And the job of the leader in an entrepreneurial context is really to identify opportunities, protect innovations, motivate people working around them to take advantage of new opportunities. And so if we are going to be serious at being successful at strategic entrepreneurship, then we really need to make sure we have these three elements present within our organisation. Now, when thinking about strategic entrepreneurship, there's a very powerful model of strategic entrepreneurship and how it might function within the organisation that was developed by Michael Hitt and a series of research colleagues back in 2011. And one of the articles I've put out here for you is an article by Hitt, which tells you a little bit about this model. And what I'll do now is just quickly walk you through the main parts of this model. But when you're thinking about strategic entrepreneurship, you need to be thinking about how you might build this process within your organisation so that you're more successful at engaging in strategic entrepreneurship. So Hitt and his colleagues identified that there are sort of three parts to the input process output model of strategic entrepreneurship. So for strategic entrepreneurship to happen, we need to think about the inputs to the process, we need to think about the actual process itself and what that might look like, and we might need to think about what are the outputs or outcomes that we might achieve from strategic entrepreneurship. So let's start with the inputs. When deciding to engage in strategic entrepreneurship, there are sort of three broad categories of inputs that we need. The first thing is we need to have the right sort of environmental factors present that will enable us to take advantage of an opportunity. Organisations, individual entrepreneurs do not exist in a vacuum, and their ability to engage in entrepreneurial behaviour is in part influenced and shaped by the environmental factors that are around them. So for example, the types of government policies or the availability of industry support might be important factors in determining whether there's a willingness or a desire to engage in entrepreneurial activity. Things like national culture, because again, some cultures tend to have a more positive attitude towards entrepreneurial behaviours than other cultures, can be a very important environmental factor in driving entrepreneurial behaviour. So we need to be mindful of what the entrepreneurial factors are that surround the organisation. We need to think about the organisational resources that we have available to us to engage in entrepreneurial actions. Because we're developing something new and we don't know whether that new thing is going to be successful, the entrepreneurial process tends to be quite resource hungry. And so we need to have plenty of available resources for the organisation. So when we talk about organisational resources, we're talking about, again, things like organisational culture. We're talking about having financial resources and time resources available to the organisation that would enable us to engage in entrepreneurial actions. And we need to think about individual resources, the resources such as knowledge that reside within our people, and how those resources enable us to be entrepreneurial. So again, we need to think about those inputs. But those inputs on their own won't lead to strategic outcomes. We need to think about the process by which we manage the interactions between those outputs to achieve the success that we want from entrepreneurial behaviour. And so the process part really is known as resource orchestration. This is where the organisation and the leaders of the organisation manage the relationship between environmental factors, organisational resources and individual resources in such a way that they're able to achieve the greatest outcome for the organisation. And this is where the real skill lies, managing this process effectively to ensure that the organisation comes up with a new opportunity, that it has the resources in place to take advantage of that opportunity, and it has the skills needed to drive that opportunity through to the market. And then the final part of the model is really thinking about the outputs of strategic entrepreneurship. And broadly, when we think about strategic entrepreneurship, what we're trying to do is achieve greater value for the customer. If we can provide a product, whether it's a physical good or a service for our customer, that satisfies them in ways that are better than other products they currently have in their possession or other products that are currently in the market, then that greater value is going to encourage the customer to purchase that product. So a central focus of any entrepreneurial activity has to be increasing value for the customer. And the idea is that if we can increase value, then we should be able to achieve competitive advantage, because if we can provide customers with a product that satisfies their needs more effectively than other products do, then that gives us an advantage over other organisations. And if those things come together, if we create value and the customers like that value, then we're able to capture that value by creating wealth. So that means that we can create wealth for us as an organisation. So we might generate greater profitability, increase revenue flows, which we can then use to run our business more effectively. It might have societal benefits. We see this all the time when new innovations like driverless car technology or mobile phone technology improves the social conditions under which we live. If we have better access to better products that enable us to do things more efficiently, then that gives people more time and it gives people greater benefit. And there are also benefits to the individual. Each individual person derives considerable value from new products. So when we think about strategic entrepreneurship, we need to think about how we manage all of these aspects together to achieve an outcome for the organisation. Now, strategic entrepreneurship is not an easy process, and there are actually a number of barriers or issues that can prevent the full implementation of strategic entrepreneurial approaches. What I want to do is just quickly touch on these for you, because again they're expanded on and discussed in greater length in the article that I've provided for you on Milo. So one of the barriers can be the structure of the organisation and the power relationships within an organisation. Inherently, whenever we engage in entrepreneurial activity, whenever we undergo a process of innovation, what we're doing is threatening and undermining the existing power base and structures within an organisation. And people often derive their worth within an organisation from those power structures. And so what can often happen is that people within organisations will resist change, will resist entrepreneurial activity, because it undermines their position. And so unless we have the right sort of structure and relationships within the organisation, again driven often by the culture, then what we see is that strategic entrepreneurship never happens. Flowing on from that, there might be a really strong misalignment between the culture of the organisation and a need to engage in strategic and entrepreneurial actions. I said before that for strategic entrepreneurship to prosper, we need to have the right sort of culture present within the organisation. There may be significantly competing demands upon resources. I think one of the key things you need to remember from the very start of this unit about organisations and entrepreneurial activity is that all organisations and all entrepreneurs face resource deficiencies. It doesn't matter how big or how small your organisation is, it's really just a matter of relative scale. And so organisations have to think very carefully about how are they going to use their limited resources in the most effective way to achieve the outcomes they need for their business. Strategic entrepreneurship again can be undermined by a lack of leadership and organisational buy-in. We talked before about the importance of strategic leadership driving change within organisation, and if we don't have the right sort of leadership structure in place, then the organisation may never successfully engage in entrepreneurial activity. And the final thing we need to think about are competitive pressures. One of the problems entrepreneurs face is they often tend to be inward focused, in the sense that they focus very much on their entrepreneurial activity, the opportunity they're trying to take advantage of, and they ignore the fact that the organisations around them, their competitors, are trying to compete with them, are trying to do their own innovation. And so sometimes, no matter how successful we are at innovating, our competitors might outmaneuver us with their own entrepreneurial or innovative behaviours. Now, as I said, the purpose of this little lecture was just to give you a very quick overview of what strategic entrepreneurship is. To understand more about the concept of strategic entrepreneurship, I encourage you to have a look at the articles I've put onto the Milo site for you. And in the workshop, we'll be discussing the concept of strategic entrepreneurship in greater detail.